December 1941. A curtain of snow sweeps over Ladd Field, Alaska. Wind howls, temperatures sink to -40, and the only signs of life are the lonely, hooded figures bracing themselves against Arctic gales. Inside a cramped wooden shack, a team of U.S. weather specialists gather around radio equipment, maps, and battered logbooks, trying to decipher the sky, predict the storm, and keep the war's deadliest front from swallowing Allied plans whole. To most, they are just the weathermen. What few know, these soldiers and civilians are part of America's most critical, clandestine operation in the far north. Their mission: read the sky, guard the Arctic, and help turn the tide of World War II. As one officer scribbles in his diary, "Our enemy here is not flesh and blood, it is the cold, the uncertainty, and the deadly silence before a storm." The problem: crisis. From the start of the war, Alaska's weather was an enigma. With the Japanese threat looming from the Aleutian Islands and Soviet Lend-Lease flights crossing the Arctic, every battle in the North Pacific would be won or lost, first by those who could predict the next storm. Visibility could drop to 0 in minutes. Winds toppled tents and planes alike. Frostbite wasn't a risk, it was a promise. Weather decided which convoys could sail, which bombers would take flight, and whether a life-saving airlift became a deadly gamble. The United States Army Air Corps established a single lonely detachment at Ladd Field in November 1940, just 6 men and a handful of radios, to tame the chaos of Alaskan skies. By December 1941, with America at war, the mission expanded across the territory, watching, measuring, and deciphering data for every aircraft, ship, and base. But with Japanese forces advancing to Attu and Kiska, and Allied convoys desperate to evade detection, the stakes grew higher each day. The innovators, the mavericks. Within weeks of Pearl Harbor, the weather warriors of Alaska were racing time, establishing outposts at Elmendorf, Annette Island, Yakutat, Nome, Northway, and Fort Randall. By the summer of 1942, they'd leapfrogged down the Aleutian chain: Umnak, Adak, Amchitka, cold green specks on the map. Each post was a lifeline of forecasts for the North Pacific War. With staff barely out of college, these men became engineers, radio operators, rescue scouts, and meteorological improvisers. One squad, marooned by a blizzard on St. Matthew Island, survived on seal meat and ingenuity until relief arrived. Another risked everything, hauling radio gear through gale-force winds to keep the bombers flying. Their leader, Captain Wilson Neal, later Lot-Call Neal, demanded one thing: no mission launches, no supply runs, no patrols until we have the numbers. Lives depend on it. The breakthrough: secret operations. By late 1942, these stations were more than science. They were the nerve center of the Alaskan campaign. The weathermen prepared daily coded reports for the 11th Air Force, fleet submarines stalking the Aleutians, and the Lend-Lease lifeline supplying Soviet Russia. After the liberation of Attu, a weather station at Alexei Point provided the vital forecasts for U.S. raids on Paramushir and the Kuril Islands, among the war's coldest, most isolated missions. By the end of 1943, over 32 stations and 500 personnel, engineers, radiomen, meteorologists, spanned Alaska. Every shift, they faced not just Japanese reconnaissance, but the greatest threat of all: Arctic winter. End of Part 1. Transition night descends on a wind-blown hut at Adak. A young sergeant copies wind speeds and cloud heights, transmits in Morse code, and listens for a reply that will decide whether pilots live or die. Against odds and every conceivable hardship, America's weather warriors keep vigil, silent guardians on the last frigid edge of the war. It is early 1942. With the Japanese striking the Aleutians, America's weather warriors shift into high alert. From Ladd Field to Adak, Elmendorf to remote outposts on St. Matthew and Amchitka, weather teams establish a chain of Arctic forecasting stations, each isolated, vital, and dangerously exposed to the fury of the northern skies. Winter brings storms that obliterate visibility for weeks. The thermometer plunges to -60. Frostbite and hypothermia become daily risks. Every weather report sent by Morse code is a fight against the elements, not just the enemy. Meteorologists labor beside engineers, radio operators, and aviators in small wooden huts or tents. Crew members trek through snow and wind to check instrument towers. Anemometers freeze, cables snap, barometers shatter. Each reading must be logged, transmitted, and cross-checked, often in blizzard conditions. A sergeant recalls, you'd grab a shovel and dig 2 miles just to get wind speed at the right spot. Some days you lost half your strength to the cold before breakfast. Technical breakthroughs enable new survival tactics. Heated shelters built from scavenged aircraft panels and oil drums. Radio sets modified for Arctic conditions. Insulated in canvas, operated with mittens on. Weather balloons launched from snowfields at midnight, tracked by radar to predict incoming cyclones and blizzards. Not every story is survival. In February 1944, the squad at Chuginadak Station, 2 weathermen and 1 radio operator, vanished searching for a grounded supply barge. All succumb to exposure before rescue can reach them. Every month, at least 1 weather station reports deaths from frostbite, accidents, or the hazards of transport by sea and air. Awards follow for those who persist. The 11th Operational Weather Squadron receives 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 17 Bronze Stars, and 5 Air Medals. Survival is as heroic as any combat mission. Between attacks and storms, the weather warriors write a new kind of battle report. Japanese bombers may come tomorrow, but tonight's wind will kill you if the shelter leaks. Every flight in Alaska runs on numbers gathered. Every safe landing, every Lend-Lease aircraft bound for Siberia, every sailor saved from a North Pacific convoy. Underneath it all is a steady rhythm. Morse code tapping through the night, reports encrypted, relayed, and guiding Allied victory in the world's most unpredictable environment. By mid-1943, the 11th Weather Squadron operates in a blizzard of secrecy and pressure. Tech sergeants and college-trained meteorologists wake before dawn in huts thick with frost, jotting temperatures and wind on waterproof slates before their breath freezes on the air. Each reading is encoded, numbers woven into ciphers, relayed by Morse, and hand-decoded in Anchorage, Dutch Harbor, and at commands in Washington and Moscow. Their product is never just tomorrow's weather. It's a warning or a green light to send bombers, scramble fighters, move convoys, or ground everything. One forecast could decide a whole campaign. The threat of enemy spies is real. While America races to build new stations, the Nazis charter U-boats to hide automatic weather transmitters as far as Labrador, Greenland, and North Norway. American teams intercept these signals, triangulating their sources, and send patrols to hunt them down. The weather war becomes a game of code breakers, Arctic expeditions, and radio duels over frozen wilderness. On the home front, women answer the call as well. By 1944, over 900 women serve as weather observers and forecasters in the U.S. Weather Bureau, many dispatched to Alaska after accelerated science training, filling vital posts as men are sent overseas. In Anchorage and Fairbanks, they launch balloons, analyze cold fronts, and send coded warnings to the front, knowing that one missed blizzard could cost hundreds of lives. Meanwhile, every forecast is a wager against chaos. During the lead-up to the Allied landings on Attu, 2 days of abnormally light winds allow a surprise troop insertion, forecasted with uncanny accuracy by ADAC's weather warriors. Later, when Operation Cottage retakes Kiska, a dense fog, predicted by Aleutian stations, hides advancing Allied forces from last-minute Japanese bombers. But risk is constant. At ADAC, a sudden whiteout strands a weather team. Rescue planes are grounded. The men eat cold rations, wrap themselves in parachute silk, and wait out the storm, finally hiking to safety 13 hours later with severe frostbite. Elsewhere, a Japanese reconnaissance float plane bombs a weather station at Amchitka, wounding 2 and nearly obliterating the entire team. In the tundra, the aerographers of attached Navy patrol units operate night and day, launching weather balloons from creaking wooden catwalks. They measure pressure, wind, and temperature, record data on damp logbooks while wearing oilskins and fur, each entry a lifeline for convoy ships dodging U-boats or fighters seeking a gap in storms. Intelligence officers study weather intercepts for clues, patterns hidden not just in the sky but in the codebooks. Allied authorities know the Germans are watching, so codes are rotated, dummy data is shuffled in, and weather warriors become amateur cryptanalysts as well as scientists and survivors. The Allies' mastery of Arctic weather gives vital advantage. When storms build in Siberia or across the Bering Strait, American meteorologists can predict sunny weather in Western Europe a week later. This information becomes part of the ultimate Allied weapon, strategic timing. Air Marshal Tedder later reflects, It was the forecasts from Alaska that let us launch assaults, evacuate wounded, and break blockades. Intelligence, operations, safety, every part of the war depended first on those numbers from the cold. As 1944 arrives, the weather warriors are exhausted, isolated, but victorious. Many will suffer frostbite, illness, PTSD, or vanish from history. A few write their memoirs or receive citations. Some find their passion for science lasts a lifetime, helping build the post-war National Weather Service, while others disappear, never again as close to life and death as on the most secret battlefield of the North. By late 1944, Alaska's weather warriors have shaped every mission. Bombing raids, rescue ops, Lend-Lease aircraft transfers to Siberia, even the push to retake Attu and Kiska. Their reach stretches from Fairbanks and Anchorage to the far tips of Adak and Shemya, a network of skittish outposts sending information that decides the fate of entire operations. Ladfield, opened in the bitter winter of 1940 as a cold-weather test station, now stands at the center. Many nights, crews drop everything to keep fires burning, ice off the instruments, and radios working. A private struggles to clean floors only to watch water freeze before his boots. Sleep is precious, but survival is the real shift, one staff note reads. If the stove fails and frost sets in, 2 men take turns guarding the coal pile, shoveling, and keeping the embers alive until dawn. In cramped barracks, base scientists record critical findings, lessons about wing icing, cold weather clothing, navigation, armament, and the physics of flight in Arctic air. Everything learned at Ladfield is applied immediately. New engine oils, heated pitot tubes, reinforced tires, winterized guns, and modified cockpits. In just 2 years, these frozen fixes help save countless lives in Alaska and across the northern front. Testing continues long after Pearl Harbor. Fighter squadrons scramble against Japanese bombers that attack Dutch harbor and fortresses on Umnak Island. Pilots and engineers discover brutal truths. The weather is even deadlier than the enemy. One squadron logs more dead from exposure and hypothermia than in combat. Another patrol, lost in blizzards near Kiska, returns only after 3 days on rations, each survivor frostbitten, limping, but alive. The effort is part global collaboration, part improvisation. At Ladfield, U.S. and Soviet crews meet as part of the Alaska-Siberia ALSIP route, one of the largest Lend-Lease aviation projects, exchanging new planes for the Soviet air war. Here, American, Canadian, Russian, and local Aleut soldiers work together, trading not only equipment, but knowledge, language, and the secrets of Arctic survival. Among the trailblazers is Margaret Hunold, one of the Navy's pioneering female aerologists. She launches balloons, codes forecasts, and tours the Aleutians, encountering icy runways, winds strong enough to knock airframes sideways, and relentless storms. Her reports become lifelines for pilots and ship captains miles away, and bring her story to national headlines when photos of her at Adak's joint weather control huts are released across America. Behind every milestone is relentless hardship. Engineers and mechanics repair planes in the open, sometimes fabricating parts from scrap metal and parachute silk to keep them running, despite temperatures plunging to -80 Fahrenheit. Men sleep in plywood huts so poorly insulated they must hang blankets from the ceiling and keep running shoes under the stove to thaw for the next shift. Many will remember the war not for bombs or bullets, but for the frozen hunger, endless wind, and brotherhood built in the silence of the Arctic night. After the war, Ladfield transforms into a permanent base, first for the Air Force, then the Army. Testing continues, focused on next-generation cold-weather gear, aircraft, and Arctic tactics through the nuclear age. Long after the last Japanese soldiers leave the Aleutians, the legacy remains. Every bomb crater and gun position on Kiska still faces the sky. Every instrument shack and barracks on Adak is a scar of the forgotten weather war. Historians and archaeologists sift through relics, empty shell casings, rusted fuel drums, wind-battered Quonset huts. Nothing has changed. The Japanese guns are still pointing skyward the same way they did when the Americans were landing, a surveyor notes. And the memories persist. 144,000 Allied troops stationed in Alaska, hundreds of forgotten graves, and the quiet pride of those who braved some of the harshest conditions in the world. Technology transformed by the weather warriors means today's flights across Alaska and Siberia still use cold weather know-how first tested in WW2. Every safe flight over the tundra owes thanks to those sleepless nights at Ladd Field. The ultimate impact. Weather forecasting in Alaska was more than a scientific triumph. It was a tactical revolution, a shield for convoys, a blessing for pilots, and a bridge for Allied victory. The men and women who risked life and limb made history, guided by numbers, driven by grit, and remembered only in the frozen wind of the north. By September 1945, as the last Soviet pilots lift off from Ladd Field and the Lend-Lease program closes, America's weather warriors know their line has held. More than 7,900 aircraft have crossed Alaska from factories to war zones, shepherded by forecasts, radios, and the courage of men and women who braved winds, ice, and enemy guns. For many, returning home is like waking from a dream no one understands. Engineers, cold nose boys, and stationed women shake off the frost, trade boots for shoes, and return to families who have heard only rumors of Arctic hardships. Some recover from frostbite and shock, others move on to civilian weather service, aviation, or scientific research, never again as close to the edge as in the wilderness of Alaska. Ladd Field, once a cluster of weather shacks and hangars, transforms after the war into Fort Wainwright, a major hub for cold weather testing, Arctic air defense, and new technological frontiers. Aircraft and tactics developed in Alaska are now routine for global air and rescue ops. The base supports the DE line, White Alice, and nuclear readiness against Cold War threats. Legacy is everywhere. Engineers use wartime notes to invent safer survival gear, heated flight suits, more robust radios, and standardized testing for polar missions. Women from the Weather Bureau are honored, and some remain as pioneers, launching new labs and leading expeditions. The stories of those lost by plane crash, exposure, or combat are remembered each year in Alaska and by military historians worldwide. Archaeologists and historians track relics left behind: fuel drums on Adu, shell casings on Kiska, radio towers battered by wind but still defiant against the sky. One survivor sends a letter to the Ladd Field newsletter. In the north, we fought more than the enemy. We fought for science, for safe passage, for every life in our care. May no one forget the cold wind and the silent nights that helped win the world's greatest war. Today, military aviators flying from Fairbanks, search and rescue units braving the Aleutians, and scientists charting Arctic storms all owe a debt to the weather warriors. Their legacy is simple. Victory does not belong to those who fire the loudest guns, but those who endure the hardest trials, who read the sky, defy the cold, and never stop watching for tomorrow. The Arctic wind still howls, but beneath it runs the memory and pride of America's secret weather warriors.